least we know when it happens. Every December at First U, because we know the children don't all have mittens, gloves, and hats, we adorn our Christmas tree with things that we've got our mitten tree, with things that we can give to the children and their families. We tell of the story of the mitten tree, but we don't always tell the story of the snowsuit fund, where we bring our things, right? First of all, I want to thank everybody who came yesterday and participated, those who created our Advent spiral, those who brought things for our mitten tree, and we'll still collect more over the month for the snowsuit fund that brings snowsuits to many children. Just like the character of Sarah in the mitten tree, over 35 years ago, founding members of the Snowsuit Fund, Joan Gullen and Ralph G. Tanis, noticed children were going without not just mittens, but even snowsuits and pants during the cold winter months in Ottawa. They rallied support from businesses and individuals to meet what unfortunately has been an ongoing challenge: keeping children in need warm during the winter months. The charity mainly raises funds for the purchase and distribution of new and well-used snow jackets and snowsuits to children 15 years and under, right here in our community. And the demand for the service, unfortunately, continues to grow. Just imagine during COVID times what the demand is for outerwear for the children. In a typical season, the Snowsuit Fund distributes about 16,000 new snowsuits to qualifying families. And countless other families benefit from their available collection of not just new snowsuits, but also the used, gentle winter outwear that people donate, like we do from our mitten tree. Although they hope to one day close their doors for good, they realize that in the short term, they hope to continue to ensure that no child is left out in the cold. Fortunately, they've established relationships with these Canadian snowsuit manufacturers for excellent negotiated prices. So if you also donate online, cash donations are well spent. So throughout December, there'll be 2 boxes outside between 11 and 3 on weekdays. 1 box for anything new, mittens, hats, scarves, snowsuits, boots, for children and adults, for their families as well. And any gently used snowsuits, snow pants, snow jackets can be put in the other box for the Snowsuit Fund. And I want to add a special thank you to Andrew Drake, who's volunteered to transport all of our clothing donations to the Snowsuit Fund. Thank you, Andrew. And so let us have a hymn now for this season.
It's beginning to look a lot like Christmas, and and we'll go for a walk is the hope of Janice and Jen. And Mom and Dad can hardly wait for school to start again. It's beginning to look a lot like Christmas. Everywhere you go, there's a tree in the Grand Hotel, one in the park as well, the sturdy kind that doesn't mind the snow. It's beginning to look a lot like Christmas. Soon the bells will start, and the thing that will make them ring is the carol that you sing right within your heart.
Thank you, Deirdre. The season is a mix of joy, like we heard in the song, and the joy of giving, like we think of with the mitten tree. And it's also a season that's hard for people, a time when people have lost loved ones, a time when, especially in COVID times, it's going to be a little harder this year. This day, December 6th, is not just the first or second Sunday of Advent, but it's also officially the National Day of Remembrance and Action on Violence Against Women, because Canadians remember a tragic day that occurred 31 years ago this year, when a man who failed to gain admission to university walked into École Polytechnique de Montréal and killed 14 women, only women. Most of the women were studying to be engineers. We will remember each of them in a moment, but before we do, let us lift up the efforts for good that has come out of the tragedy. Thank goodness there has been some. Mary Wells, who had graduated 2 years earlier than the women who were killed from McGill, went on to do graduate work in materials engineering, and she is now Dean of Engineering and Physical Science at the University of Guelph. She has created an online tribute to the victims. She created this last year called 30 Years Later. I think you can go to 30yearslater.com. And this profiles 30 women who graduated in engineering within 3 years of the tragedy. Their accomplishments include designing aircraft and creating technology for earthquake-proof buildings to other things, but also going beyond engineering, as these women went on to pursue careers ranging from astronaut and governor general, of course, Julie Payette, to vice president of a major Canadian bank. The project demonstrates that one man wanted to get rid of women in engineering, but in fact the opposite occurred. Over the years, the white rose has become the symbol of Polytechnique Montreal's commemorative activities. Polytechnique created the Order of the White Rose in tribute to the victims as well as the wounded, the families, the faculty members, the employees, and the students who were forever affected by the tragedy. A $30,000 scholarship is awarded annually by the Polytechnique administration to a woman engineering student who wishes to enroll in graduate studies in engineering at the institution of her choice in Canada or anywhere in the world. 31 years later, to be a woman in Canada still means living with risk, being targeted for violence. The statistics aren't good. COVID times have even seen a rise in both the frequency and severity of domestic violence. So may we remain vigilant against violence, especially gender-based violence. These last 2 years, Janice Tate has envisioned a ritual to remember the women who died. The Men's Breakfast Group in the past has donated white roses and would honor the 14 victims. And so I want to thank the Men's Breakfast Group, who will again this morning honor the women virtually.
Genevieve Bergeron, age 21, was a second-year scholarship student in civil engineering who played clarinet and sang in the choir at the Montreal Symphony Orchestra. She wasn't sure whether she wanted to pursue a career in engineering or music when she graduated from university, because she was talented in both fields.
Hélène Colgan, 23, was a strong student at the tail end of a degree in mechanical engineering and already had 3 job offers in her field.
Natalie Croteau, 23, was outgoing and enterprising, expecting to graduate in mechanical engineering the following spring.
Barbara Degnaud, age 22, was an engineering student and a teaching assistant for her father, Pierre Degnaud, an engineering professor at the University of Quebec's École de Technologie Supérieure.
Anne-Marie Edward, 21, was studying chemical engineering at the school and loved all sports, especially skiing.
Maud Havernick, age 29, a metallurgy student, had a bachelor's degree in environmental design and started out her working life as an interior designer, creating habitats for community living. She chose to go back to school at L'École Polytechnique to fulfill her dream of being an engineer and studying materials engineering.
Barbara Kluznik-Ridjovitz, age 31, spoke 5 languages, was outgoing and friendly, was a first-year nursing student at Université de Montréal, who had given up her career as an economist to take up nursing. From Poland, she and her husband sought the safety of Canada and ended up in École Polytechnique cafeteria by chance, as it had the lowest prices on campus.
Maïse Laganière, age 25, recently married, was not a student, but a budget clerk in the finance department. She was always smiling and calm.
Maryse Leclerc, 23 years old, was a 4th-year engineering student and a rebel and a go-getter.
Anna-Marie Lemay, age 22, wanted to go into healthcare, but ultimately chose to study mechanical engineering, in large part because of a close friend who had lost the use of his legs. Lemay visited him weekly to help him in rehabilitation, and it was there that she realized the importance of mechanical devices for the handicapped.
Sonia Pelletier, 28 years old, was a mechanical engineering student attending her last day of school before graduating. She had a job interview lined up the following week. Quiet and undemanding, it was said she won every competition and secured every scholarship.
Michaela Richard, or Mimi, 21 years old, was a 2nd-year metallurgy student who was brilliant, happy, and had a calming presence.
Annie St. Arnaud, age 23, was a dynamic student in her final class before graduating in mechanical engineering, involved in several student associations and participating in sports at the university. She wanted to make the world a better place and loved adventure.
Annie Turcotte, 20 years of age, who had been a straight-A student in high school, won a bursary for women in science, and taught swimming lessons in a summer camp for children with disabilities. She was in her 1st year of engineering studies, committed to nature and finding ways to protect the environment.
These are words adapted from UU minister, the Reverend Robin Tanner. Can I tell you about the world I long for? It does not include mass killings. It does not include lone wolves who seem part of a larger pack. It does not include wondering who's dead. I want instead to live in the early hours where we find one another without knowing how, and crawl into warm beds with Cheerios and stories of turtles. I don't want to be right or smarter. I just want the slaughter to end. The tender thread that pulled us together before daybreak led me all day long, fragile as it may be. I am tired and could go back to sleep, but then I remember all those mothers with an empty bed. And then shock, and then rage, spirals, and then love once more. The tender, fragile thread. I call the names into the dark hallway, whispers into desperation. I call the names of those with power to change this. I call my own. We, the willing, follow the threads to one another, past rightness and quips and tweets. We will find one another and persist past sunrise. This is the time in the service when we are drawn closer to the heart of love at our center and hold those both near and far, loved ones and strangers in all our hearts. As we remember, let us drop a stone and may the weight of the world fall away. Matilda would like a stone for her brother Albert, who was killed in World War II on this day, December 6th, 1944. You are always in our hearts. Matilda has another stone in remembrance of George. I will always love you. This is a stone of remembrance for Faye. A stone for World AIDS Day, which passed this past Tuesday. Let us hold in our hearts the memory of those who have died and suffered from AIDS and those still living with AIDS. A stone for the 14 Polytechnique victims and their families. Such a senseless loss. May their deaths not be in vain. And a stone for all those who are anxious about what the holidays may bring this year. Knowing that they will be different, may we take and make the joy that we can. Let us hold the joys and sorrows we carry in our hearts and on our minds and share a moment of silence together.
This morning's reading are words adapted from the late UU minister, Reverend Dr. Charles S. Stephen Jr. May the spirit of this season help all those who are lost find their way. Through the noise and turmoil of these days ahead and into the heart of Christmas itself, to its quieter joy and its peace, may we learn that we cannot hear the songs until our own hearts learn to sing them. May those whose needs are so great be fed and clothed and soothed and loved. May those of us whose needs are so great know how close we are to what we seek, and how often the things we want so desperately are already ours. May we be strong enough for the joys and the pains of love, and may we, with quiet persistence in our hearts, learn to enjoy the small happenings of our days and hours, and find in them the meaning that touches us most deeply, that moves us most profoundly. May we find, after all, that life is good. May it be so.
Thank you, Sharmila. I think we all have our favorite Christmas stories. And this is one that I think you probably don't know. It's from Tom Hegg, who's a writer from Minnesota, my home state in the United States. And my mother and father heard this story and loved it so much. One Christmas, they gave all four of us in the family a copy of our own cup of Christmas tea. And we probably all have in our lives people that we're not so excited about checking in with at Christmas time, but we feel duty-bound to. And this is Tom's story set to a poem. I think this year we're all going to have to be a little more intentional about checking in with those people, family and friends who we know need a little cup of Christmas tea. Yes, maybe from a distance, but here's the story. The log was in the fireplace, all spiced and set to burn. At last, the yearly Christmas race was in the clubhouse turn. The cards were in the mail, and the gifts beneath the tree, and 30 days reprieve till Visa would catch up with me. And though smug satisfaction seemed the order of the day, something still was nagging me and would not go away. A week before, I got a letter from my old great aunt. It read, "Of course I understand completely, if you can't. But if you find you have some time, how wonderful if we could have a little chat and share a cup of Christmas tea. She had a mild stroke last year, which crippled her left side. Though housebound now, my folks had said it hadn't hurt her pride. They said she'd love to see you. What a nice thing it would be for you to go and maybe have a cup of Christmas tea. But boy, I didn't want to go. Oh, what a bitter pill to see an old relation and how far she'd gone downhill. I remembered her as vigorous, as funny, and as bright. I remembered Christmas Eves when she regaled us half the night. I didn't want to risk all that. I didn't want the pain. I didn't need to be depressed. I didn't need the strain. And what about my brother? Why not him? She's his aunt too. I thought I had it justified, but then before I knew, the reasons not to go I so painstakingly had built were cracking wide and crumbling in an acid rain of guilt. I put on boots and gloves and cap, shame stinging every pore, and armed with squeegee, sand, and map, I went out my front door. I drove in from the suburbs to the older part of town. The pastels of newer homes gave way to gray and brown. I had that disembodied feeling as the car pulled up and stopped beside the wooden house that held the Christmas cup. How I got up to the door, really, I couldn't tell. I watched my hand rise and press the button of the bell. I waited, aided by my nervous rocking to and fro. And just as I was thinking I should turn and around and go, I heard the rattle of the china in the hutch against the wall. The triple beat of 2 feet and a crutch came down the hall. The clicking of the door hatch and the sliding of the bolt, and a little swollen struggle popped it open with a jolt. She stood there, pale and tiny, looking fragile as an egg. I forced myself from staring at the brace that held her leg. And though her thick bifocals seemed to crack and spread her eyes, their milky and refracted depths lit up young surprise. Come in, she laughed the words. She took me by the hand, and all my fears dissolved away as if by her command. We went inside, and then before I knew how to react, before my eyes and ears and nose was Christmas past, alive, intact. The scent of candied oranges, of cinnamon and pine, the antique wooden soldiers in their military line, the porcelain nativity I'd always loved so much, the Dresden and the crystal I'd been told I mustn't touch. My spirit fairly bolted like a child out of class and danced among the ornaments of calico and glass. Like magic, I was 6 again, deep in Christmas spell, steeped in the million memories the boy inside knew well. And here among old Christmas cards so lovingly displayed, a special place of honor for the ones we kids had made. And there beside her rocking chair, the center of it all, my great aunt stood and said how nice it was to come and call. I sat and rattled on about the weather and the flu. She listened very patiently, then smiled and said, "What's new?" Thoughts and words began to flow. I started making sense. I lost the phony breeziness I use when I get tense. She was still passionately interested in everything I did. She was positive, encouraging, just like when I was a kid. Simple generalities still sent her into fits. She demanded the specifics, the particulars, the bits. We talked about the limitations that she had had to face. She spoke with utter candor and with humor and good grace. Then defined the reality of crutch and straightened knee. On wings of hospitality, she flew to brew the tea. I sat alone with feelings that I hadn't felt in years. I looked around at Christmas through a thick hot blur of tears, and the candles and the holly she had arranged on every shelf, the impossibly good cookies she still somehow baked herself. But these rich tactile memories became quite pale and thin when measured by the Christmas my great aunt kept within. Her body halved and nearly spent, and my great aunt was whole. I saw a Christmas miracle, the triumph of a soul. The triple beat of 2 feet and a crutch came down the hall. the rattle of the china in the hutch against the wall. She poured 2 cups, she smiled, and then she handed one to me. And then we settled back for a cup of Christmas tea. And now we're going to sing hymn 240. I heard the bells on Christmas Day, and the words are by Unitarian Henry Wadsworth Longfellow.
I heard the bells on Christmas Day, their old familiar carols play, and wild and sweet the words repeat of peace on earth to goodwill. And in despair I bowed my head. There is no peace on earth, I said, for hate is strong and mocks the song of peace on earth to goodwill. Then pealed the bells more loud and deep. God is not dead, nor doth God sleep. The wrong shall fail, the right prevail, with peace on earth to goodwill. Till ringing, singing on its way, the world returns sublime of peace on earth to goodwill.
This is the time in our service when we usually accept the offering. You may go to our website or contact our finance manager to find out how you may keep up with your pledge or make a donation during these times. We give these gifts freely. We receive these gifts gratefully. We dedicate these gifts to the work of our congregation, serving human wholeness, caring for the planet, upholding religious freedom, welcoming the stranger, loving one another.
Before we extinguish the chalice, I want to thank everyone on the worship team. Thank you, Justine and Deirdre, and also Sharmila and Ellen and Anusha and Akash. And also for those behind the scenes, Gareth and Fred and Julia, our production team. And so, Anusha, if you'd join me, I'm going to read these words from the Christmas meditation by the Reverend Christine Robinson. May moments of quiet lead us to the heart of the season, which is peace. Let us open our hearts to a story of the season. Like the wandering couple, may we find our great ways to be of help to others. Like the lumbering beasts, may we be silent witnesses to the unfathomable glory of life. Like the shepherds on the hill, may we know that we need never to be afraid. Like the journeying wise, may we always have the courage to follow our stars. Like the angels, may we cry peace to a troubled world. May this season of peace and goodwill nudge our world towards its ideals. And then will Christmas truly dawn. Go in joy, go in love, and may the spirit of the holidays be with you throughout this month. May it be so.